Welcome back to The Line. The city of Albuquerque is considering a pilot project that would help the city partner with a private company to hire former law enforcement officers to respond to some non-emergency calls, particularly house breaks and things like that. Now, Mayor Berry recently announced a plan to address rising crime rates here in the state's largest city, but there are still a lot of unanswered questions like how the contractors will be trained and why the city, Tom Garrity, just doesn't hire more staff. This is an interesting thing. $1.3 million a year for 3 years, almost $4 million. Is that a good, wise use of money?
Well, the concept itself is a good one. Yes, I think it's a good use of money.
Okay.
Because what the idea that's being proposed in a bill that's being sponsored by both Republicans and Democrats in the City Council is the concept's good because there is a really severe issue with property crime in Albuquerque specifically. These community response specialists, or whatever we want to call them, is a good idea in concept. The way that idea has been implemented, it has been totally fumbled as far as giving the appearance of being sole source for one particular contractor. Now, the reason it is a good idea, as far as the idea of these community response specialists, is because you have people who are already trained who don't need to be trained again and brought up in the ways. These are typically...
Is that for real? They don't no longer need to be trained anymore than they are just because they're veterans? I mean...
Well, you would hope that the veterans are trained. I mean, they
Things
do have a lot
though.
of... I mean, but the concept itself of, of subcontracting it, I know this has a lot of controversy because you're creating a private police force and things of that nature. But you know what? Crime is rampant in Albuquerque, and the city of Albuquerque has not been successful in really building those APD ranks. And so this is a quick fix. Whether it works or not is a whole other issue.
That's a good point. Sophie, let me ask you this. This seems to me what the mayor wants to spend money on is to be reactive, right? These are people coming in after the fact, after you've lost personal property, your car, someone's broken into your home.
That's true.
Isn't that money better spent to get on the front end of the problem than on the back end of the problem?
Well, I mean, yes, it seems to me that is the case. What the city is up against, though, is that the mayor has pushed hard to allow retired officers to come back, essentially to double dip. There's been tremendous pushback on that, and so this is a workaround. It's a workaround the unions. To a certain extent, I think it's a workaround to the DOJ. When you say, they don't need training, except that new training is supposed to be happening with APD because of the Department of Justice supervision, and so this is a force that's sort of outside of this. Now, do we think that people who are coming to your house to say, how many candlesticks did they sell? Do we think that they are likely to engage in the sort of behavior that we've seen from APD officers with the shootings that we've seen here? It seems less likely, but it is problematic. I think if the city could, they should be hiring more officers. This does allow for that double dipping in a way without putting people back on the payroll. And there was one other thing I was going to say, and I'm forgetting what it is.
That's okay.
So
It'll come back. Eric Rego, it's just okay. It happens here all the time. I want to go back to the idea of a private police force with no oversight. This is a slippery slope, dude. I mean, what happens if on one of these calls that seems so innocent, just to take some notes and things about a break-in, some old boy comes back who broke into the house, and next thing you know, we got gunplay, you got a retired officer ready to go, ready to pull his holster out and just have a go at it. You see what I mean? This could be very problematic here.
Besides the fundamental belief that you've got to have some oversight if you're going to have public servants, especially on the front lines, some accountability, and given them the track record of APD, to sort of take them out of any kind of public accountability. I'm sure there'll be some, but essentially become private contractors. But I mean, this larger sort of effort, whether it's private prisons or private police, to sort of start kind of outsourcing like the most fundamental duty of local government, which is public safety, sort of really strikes me as really, really a bad decision. And, I get the fact that you want folks for training. I agree with Sophie that perhaps some of the training they got was not the best in the first place. And I also agree with your question, which is if you really want to get the root of this, I mean, most of this property crime we know is being committed by folks who are drug addicts. It's not sort of this sort of counterfeit ring or something. They're folks who are in desperate situations, who aren't getting treatment, who are repeat sort of drug offenders, who are trying to get money so that they can get another fix. You want to invest $1.3 million, perhaps maybe it should be invested in sort of dealing with that really, really problematic population and the support that they need to kind of get out of this cycle of addiction and property crimes.
Right, exactly right. Janice, what do you make of the idea of a single sole source contract for this? That's not up for bid. Is that kosher in your world?
No. No, but because Albuquerque is home ruled, there is an exception in the procurement code for a pilot project that will extend to 3 years. I really have problems with that. But I also have problems with the numbers. The numbers don't make any sense to me.
Right.
I understand, and by the way, I brought the bill. It no longer names the sole source company, which I appreciate, so apparently it's going to go to bid. The bill will not be dropped until the 7th. I suspect this bill is not going to be dropped then, if ever. That's
Right.
my sense. But the numbers that bother me is it's about $50,000 a year per officer. You've got a private company running that. They're going to take half of that.
Thank you.
Who is going to do that? Whereas if we take this same money and hire additional PSAs where you have oversight. And one of the things, and I may be, Sophie can maybe help me here, but I worry about chain of custody. Even though these officers were previously trained, will they meet the DOJ standards? I don't know that. But here's the issue that bothers me the most is the bill says they will be unarmed, but I understand that they would be able to make merchant calls on shoplifting.
I see.
And one of the things that they cannot do is they cannot make an arrest. However, one of the things that police officers are allowed to do in a shoplifting situation is make an arrest. So, and I don't know. I'm throwing out questions here, but
sure.
my goodness. So I have a standard for privatization. If there is a stream of revenue that comes from outside of the government that can do this, then it may be a candidate for privatization.
Right.
It does not meet that criteria for me.
Interesting. Tom, you started this off. Let's keep going with you.
Okay.
The idea that, again, to your point, no one will disagree with you that crime here is a problem. No one likes their home broken into. I've been victimized 3 times and a car stolen, just like
Have
everybody
I.
else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How do we get in front of the problem? If we're going to spend $1.3 million a year for people that, is, in essence, are just taking notes, I hate to be disrespectful, but this is really what we're going to be doing. I don't get what the efficiencies are. How are we getting to the root of the problem?
And I
with
don't
this
think
method?
anybody is suggesting that $1.3 million is going to fix the problem.
Okay.
$1.3 million is going to address the symptom, where it's going to help to close a loop for the citizens of Albuquerque.
Right.
Now, I'm by no means an apologist for this particular
Sure.
plan.
You never
but
have
I
been,
think
so,
that when you look at APD. When you look at how the city of Albuquerque has really not responded and responded well, to the DOJ, to a lot of different things, this raises a lot of questions.
Right. What do you think about the idea, Janice just mentioned the PSA's police service, what do they call them?
Aids.
Public
Yeah,
safety agent.
Right.
Yeah,
Does that
thank
not
you.
make sense? Sean Willoughby from the police union said, look, these folks can qualify to be APD officers in a couple of years with this kind of work. Why are we not beefing that up? The goal is to get more officers on the street, right?
I don't know that much about the PSA program. I never really had a whole lot of confidence as a resident, a citizen of Albuquerque, to say, oh yeah, I really feel good about the PSA program.
Right.
I don't, it just seems as if that's like on the other end of these private contractors. But back to your question, I remember what I was going to say now, was that this is not going to fix the issue. The issue is much larger. It goes to behavioral health services. It
Right.
goes to changing addictions. And so far, the community effort to really kind of change that whole scene has failed because nothing has been done. You have a tax increase from Bernalillo County that's been enacted, 2 years now?
That's right.
And still nothing measurable has been done.
That's right.
Now, behavioral health services is one aspect. I think Eric brought up an excellent point as far as, how do you change the behavior? And so there's just a lot of different things, but the $1.3 million is not going to fix the issue. And I don't think it should be positioned as such. It's just going to be able to find a way to go ahead and facilitate the paperwork that is backlogged right now because of the crime.
Which is
But
in
I
many cases necessary so that people can file insurance claims.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
I think there is a question about how our insurance companies are going to feel about that. I don't know the answer to that, but you're right. It is very much after the fact instead of hitting the issue early. I'm going to say something as well. I did remember what I was going to say.
Please.
Both Governor Martinez and Mayor Berry have, and we've heard reports about this again this week, have really knocked down the number of first state and then city employees that we have. And this is another way that that the mayor is able to keep people off our payroll, which seems to be a strong priority for both our governor and our mayor, and still try to get some services taken care of. Put people on our payroll.
Right.
We need the income here.
Right.
And we can afford it.
Exactly right. Eric, pick up on that if you would too, because that's a legit point. It's part of a bigger picture here about how we run our government and, to your point, our biggest public safety issue, keeping us safe. I mean, is this money well spent? I ask again, almost $4 million over 3 years. You could do a lot with $4 million
Yeah,
over 3 years.
I agree it's a drop in the bucket in terms of what the need is, but we have not, whether it's a county revenue stream or a city, the taxpayers don't really care where it comes from, but most people understand that what's driving these property crimes, again, it's not some syndicate, it's folks
right.
in desperate situations. And by the way, I just came off jury duty. I can't talk about the details, but I can tell you all of these massive public infrastructure investments in courthouses to deal with cases of folks who are stuck in this cycle or committing
right.
property crimes, and some of them are committing violent crimes around, but there's always a drug or alcohol issue involved. There's always a story of lack of access to sort of comprehensive long-term treatment. So if you really want to start changing outcomes and for the residents too, not just for the folks who are committing these crimes, which we have to take it seriously. What's driving that?
That's right.
But the amount of money we spend at MDC, the amount of money we spend as part of our police budget and fire budget, we haven't even talked about that. The amount of money we're spending just dealing with this really endless cycle of folks in really bad situations.
Yep.
So I just think as a community, we have to come to terms with this. And, and I think privatizing fundamental public services like law enforcement is a terrible idea.
I've got 30 seconds. I know you had something there.
Well, one, I just want to bring up the point that this significantly shifts liability. Ultimately, do I think it will still be the city's liability,
Right.
but do I think we've made it more complicated? Absolutely. And I just happened to go look to see, are we looking for trying to hire more CSIs? These are the crime scene investigators who most of this describes. And no. So I again, I'm going to go back to the money, and some of this doesn't make sense, but to everybody's point, there is no doubt that we have a problem with crime. If we got the paperwork to the DAs, now that we've cut the DA's office in the courts,
right.
will it speed things up? I don't know.
That's a good point. We'll be back to the line table in a few minutes to talk about the latest news on the controversial Albuquerque Rapid Transit project.